G'day everyone, and welcome again to another show of Any News Australia. Today we've got the famous Tom Barnett with us, talking about solutions and some of those things that he's been using to help during these times as well. Welcome, Tom. How are you going?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Anthony. I am all about solutions. I think there's enough negativity gets thrown around about what's scary and bad, so I tend to only like to talk about the solutions.
Yeah, I think we're transitioning in this show too to move away from talking about all the problems. I think there is enough people talking about that. And meeting you on the weekend was really interesting, and finding a bit about you a bit more and what you're doing. And so, yeah, thanks a lot for joining us on the show. So, for everyone that hasn't heard of you or hasn't been following your show, tell us more about yourself.
Okay, sure. Well, I'm a holistic health practitioner. I live near Byron Bay in the Northern Rivers region of New South Wales. I was doing my own thing for quite a number of years, and then made a video about viruses that went viral, funnily enough. That was about 2 years ago, start of 2020. So since then, I've been doing a lot of work by doing interviews and doing live streams and creating content around the health of the body and the mind, how they intertwine together. But then with that, teaching a bit about our rights as well. And so where do they come from? What does that mean? What kind of system are we really participating in, and how to get the best of it?
Yeah, it's fantastic. So why did you start doing what you do? Like, what was it? Was there a trigger, or was there something happening? How long have you seen a problem with what's going on in this country or the world? Yeah, explain where you're coming from with all of that.
Sure. Well, in high school, in primary school, I was right into school. I really enjoyed it. And then coming into high school, I started to see cracks in things, and I didn't feel that it was quite right. So I've got a naturally questioning mind, and I started to really question absolutely everything about it. And in particular, authority, like the authority structure just didn't sit well with me at all. And what I was seeing people like tell us, and compared to what they were doing, there wasn't integrity there. There wasn't it didn't really fit. So that led me to question pretty much everything. And then when it came to the law and aspects of legalities in the legal system, I used to hear stories about unfair treatment of innocent people, and then overly fair treatment of criminals. And then I was in school, and I remember hearing a story about the guy that fell through someone's roof because he was trying to rob them, fell through the roof, broke his leg on a table that was under the roof, and then sued the family. So he was a criminal. He was breaking into the house, and he fell through the roof, broke his leg, and he sued the family. I thought it was a joke. I was bringing it up in class, like as if that's a joke. Yeah, how's about? And then no, it's real. Like the teacher's like, no, that's a real that happened. And I thought, are you kidding me? Is this what our world is like? And from then it just kind of really started triggering things where I just thought, I don't want any part of this. This is ridiculous. I've got to change it. Young man thinking he can change things. And then, through a lot of other challenges, the idea of changing things kind of went away, but it did lead me down many different ways of really diving into that particular system. And when I was 19, fresh out of having my driver license, I got a parking fine when I was at college. And it seemed really unjust to me because I thought I did everything that I really needed to do to make sure I was parked somewhere safe. So I contested the fine and I won. And I realized that there's no finalities or foregone conclusions when it comes to getting a fine, for example, because I successfully contested the fine. And since then, contested everything I've ever been given. But along the way, I realized that we're actually dealing in commerce. So what we're really looking at is we're given offers, and a fine, like a parking fine, is really an offer. And so with an offer, we have various ways to handle that. But essentially what we're doing is forming agreements by either accepting it or negotiating it or conditionally accepting it, whatever it is. We form agreements. Now that took a long time. That was 20 years worth of learning. But the curiosity was there. The curiosity was there because something right deep inside me did not sit well with what was being put in front of me. And so I just made it my business to explore that. And in doing so, it was a path for me to explore the inner workings of myself. So that by the time I became proficient in, for example, dealing in commerce, it wasn't because I'd learned the right words or how to write a notice. It was because through a lot of the experiences, I had come to a place within myself where I began to know who I was. So then the words that I spoke carried that, or the notices that I wrote carried that. They weren't just coming from a place of disempowerment. And so that's really the crux of the journey for me, was a journey from knowing something was wrong, but not knowing the answer, to becoming more of, I wouldn't say completely, but I would say more of an empowered man who can stand on his own 2 feet.
Yeah, fantastic. I guess we've all heard that story, I think, about the guy falling through the roof, and it sounded crazy to me at the time as well. But meeting you on the weekend, one of the things that impressed me the most about you when we were talking is that how intelligent and articulately you explain some of these concepts. I think there's a lot of people in this space that I've listened to in my searches as well, but you seem to be able to concisely convey that message really well. And so that's one of the reasons I thought I'd get you on the show, because people could really learn from some of what you're talking about. You mentioned when we met that you did the Solutions Empowerment course, and like we talked for a bit, I've done it also. Can you tell us what you learned in that course, and maybe how that's helped you?
Sure, yeah. So when I started learning, I'll just start there. I learned about the aspect of common law. So I figured that we only had to say that we're in common law. We only had to just tell people we're a man or a woman, and that was the end of the story. But it didn't really have real world results, and in fact, it could sometimes get you into trouble. So when I came across Mark Patalik and Solutions Empowerment, it was a bit of an eye-opener, because I became much more acutely aware of commerce and of equity. And what struck a chord with me was him saying that he was getting great results up to about 2004. And from there, they started losing a lot, of matters, either privately or in courtrooms. Didn't know what was going on. And so a guy from New Zealand, he said, you got to look into equity. And so then looking deeper into the structure of our company, then found that the principal act of the Commonwealth is not the Constitution, it's actually the Bills of Exchange Act. Bills of Exchange Act obviously regulating commerce. So it puts us firmly in that jurisdiction of commerce. And so what I got most from Solutions Empowerment was exactly that, as well as a few ways to deal with the communication aspect, really. And I broke down what Mark was teaching. So, because this is how it kind of worked, was I'd go to his seminars, and then months later, people would be asking me questions about, oh, how do you do this and how do you do that? And I said, you went to the same seminars that I went to. Why are you asking me? And you've been going to them for longer than I have. Why are you asking me? And what the difference was that when I listened to him speak, I wasn't looking for a solution from him. I wasn't looking for him to teach me what to say, or Mark, which template can I use to send to somebody? I broke down what it was that he was communicating. So he said this, so why would he say that? What's the underlying premise? So I spent a long time breaking it down. And that's how I ended up being asked to teach people the basics of commerce, because I figured out a way to, I think, simplify that where people can pick it up maybe a bit more quickly. But what I got most from Mark was I really just kind of studied him. And through breaking down his approach, that's how I managed to break everything down into its constituent parts, which is like, this is what's behind what he's saying. And I think what a lot of people were doing was focusing on what he was saying, and then wondering why they either couldn't repeat it because they're not him, they're never going to say it the same. And then also, not really getting where it's coming from. So that to me relates to a disempowered place. And if you're coming from a disempowered place, as I said earlier, I just don't think people can get the same kind of results, because it's not the words or the notices. I think it's the place it comes from.
Yeah, it's a very good point. It's a very, very good point that you make. And we'll put comments later in the chat about your YouTube channel and other places they can find some of what you talk about. But yeah, I found, a lot of people are looking for that silver bullet, that template. They can just copy and paste and change some names and sign it and send it off and everything goes away. In your experience, has something like that ever worked?
Yeah, for sure. On occasion, it's like I always relate it to talking to women. It's like if a guy goes, oh, I need to know what I can say to a woman so she'll like me or I can take her home. It's like, well, here's 10 pickup lines. If you go and throw those out there, invariably you'll get some success, but it's probably not based on anything that's repeatable. So yeah, there's definitely templates you can use, but it depends on the application. So when something is really flaccid, I mean, like a public health order or any of the COVID related things that are going on at the moment, they're really tenuous. It's not law to start with, and it's on such a shaky ground that if you do just go and put in a conditional acceptance for mask mandates or vaccinations or something to that effect, those templates are having a good effect. But if you've got a mortgage with a bank that's been established for 100 years and they've seen everyone come and go, and you send a template to them, I would hazard a guess you're not going to get a lot of success discharging a mortgage with a template letter. I think you really need to know your stuff so that what you would notice them, for example, is it's from you. It's not from just a generic hope for the best. That's like templates to me are like throwing mud at the wall and just, seeing what sticks. Whereas if you can craft your own instruments, your own notices, your own words, that's like finally honing a tool of some kind. And then you like laser that in on a target and then you'll hit the target with that as opposed to just throwing stuff randomly. So yeah, depending on the application, when somebody's new to things, I really do think that they can use some generic material and get a result. But then the more finely tuned the situation, the more finely tuned you'll need to be to get the same result.
Yeah, sure. Can you talk about some of the successes that you've had recently with, over the last 18 months? So what have you seen come across your desk and who have you been helping? And yeah, tell me where that goes.
Well, I don't generally directly help a lot of people simply because of the fact that I don't find that a lot of it is repeatable. Case in point, one of the more recent court appearances that I had for myself, which was for like unlicensed driving or unregistered car or both, can't remember. But I was in the court and when I arrive, I do my non-consent to being there. It's a very precise script, I'll call it. And I learned that from Market Solutions Empowerment. But when he came up with it, he's just like, yeah, anytime you do that, we've had 17 people use it and it's always been adjourned, sign, he dies, and it goes away. But that was like 5+ years ago. It's not the same environment anymore. So I go in and I use it. That was the first time I used the non-consent process. And I got a result, but didn't come easy. And the only reason I got the result was not because of the non-consent script, but it was knowing who I was, who the magistrate is, what the court's about, and the fact that we're in commerce and nothing else at that point. Before it can change jurisdiction, that's what we're in. And knowing that and knowing how to navigate that is what essentially allowed me to get a result on the day. And I'll explain why after I tell you what happened with the other people. So I subsequently told 3 other people about it because they just had to know. I was like, it's probably not the best day. No, I want to do it. And I said, all right, if you're willing to take responsibility for what happens, then go for it. This is the non-consent process. So I give it to them. I explain a bit about it. All 3 of them failed. Why? Because the judge interrupted them throughout their monologue of non-consenting to being there. Now, if you have the floor, you're supposed to finish what you're saying. If you start speaking and the judge interrupts you, then you do not finish what you're saying. It does not get put into the court ledger or anything to that effect. So essentially, it's almost like you never said it. So the judge interrupts them and they stop. Does that mean they've put forward what they're saying? They haven't said it. So they failed in their application of it. And that's the thing. It's not the process that you use. It's how well can you apply it? So when the judge tried to interrupt me, I continued to speak. I did not leave a space or a breath. And even at the second time I did it, when they were still interrupting me, I said, I believe I have the floor, Your Honor. And then I continued to go without a breath. And by going through it, normally, you might know, if people aren't aware, you have to establish something 3 times for it to then be you get a tacit agreement, for example. So I'd said it 3 times and they still weren't having it. So I said it 4, 5. I had to say it 6 times. Now, if somebody is just going in fresh and they know that it's rules of 3, you're probably going to have to say it 3 times, and then they're ignored and they go, oh no, now what? They don't know that they've just got to stay that course, so they'll back out. And then there's a maximum of law, which is whoever leaves the field of battle first loses. So then if somebody gives up on what they're doing, then they essentially leave the field of battle first. Therefore, they just lose. They pull themselves out of the running and they've lost, where that wasn't the foregone conclusion. So there's a lot to it where it's the application, and it really takes empowerment. It takes empowerment to be able to apply. So I generally don't help people, but I have helped quite a few. So I help some people get through borders, help some people get their job back after being told that they couldn't come back to work because of medical procedures. People traveling on airplanes. This is all recent, obviously, since COVID came around. Some debt. So what it's all about is really just forming private agreements. So one case in point that was interesting is a lot of people might have had the experience of being scammed from, say, Facebook or Gumtree or somewhere where you're buying something in the private, bartering, trading, selling goods secondhand. So there's buyer beware is the general rule. But because you're dealing in commerce, it's governed by the rules of commerce. And that means a few things. One, there has to be full disclosure. There has to be a meeting of the minds to form an agreement. And if there's money involved, then there's a contract formed. And what we might not know is that even if it's private, you and I selling each other a guitar or a camera or something, you actually have a 72-hour cooling off period. The reason you have that is because upon agreement or an exchange of anything, you have 72 hours in which to change your mind, and then there's no questions asked about that. And a court will actually bind that. So somebody got sold a dodgy van upon false pretenses. They spent their savings on it and then they missed out on their holiday. It was a horrible experience. And when they called them, they just denied everything. No, you had an opportunity to take it to a mechanic. We didn't say this, you said that. And the thing is, there's evidence, right? Because there's a thread of messages going back and forth about who said what. So what we do is we use that. We use what's there in the evidence, and then we craft a notice, which is essentially to demand something in return. And when you do that well, you form a new agreement. And so what happened was they got to keep the van and they got half the money back that they spent, which was more than enough to fix it and continue along with what they wanted to do. Now, that's not something that's usual if you've had dodgy dealings in the secondhand market, but by forming agreements with people and doing it the right way with evidence or with supporting affidavits from witnesses or something to that effect, you can take that to court and have a court administrate it, in which case they're going to be up for even more costs. So a lot of the times people will want to settle, and I won't spend too much time speaking about it, but I've litigated financial institutions and local and state government and got settlements from them. And part of that is because I've formed an agreement in the private, not in the public, and then used that to get a settlement out of court, because taking it into court, they were going to lose and it was going to cost them even more. So many different ways. Actually, I got to mention as well, because I know we spoke about it in the doco, but one of the things that gives me a lot of joy is helping people in family matters. And so there's been successes there with me making sure that kids were kept out of harm.
Yeah, fantastic. I know I'm approached by lots of people, not only family matters, but at the moment with their jobs in particular, and maybe travel restrictions and other types of things. What type of suggestions might you have? Maybe not going into completely, but where can they start looking for answers, and what type of concept should they start grasping? I know in our talk on the weekend you mentioned equity, contracts and agreements, and negotiable instruments. So
so if it's with regards, what's something specific then, Anthony? What's something specific that you think people are having issues with?
Well, I think at the moment you need to have this medical procedure or you can no longer work here.
Okay, so this will apply then whether it's traveling on an airplane or crossing a border or Doesn't matter. It's all going to apply the same here. So in this respect, you're talking about a medical procedure or medical information in general, which, as people would know, is private and personal. The only individual that can ask you for any kind of medical information is a qualified medical practitioner. And even then, it's only by your consent. You certainly are still under no obligation to actually divulge any information to a medical professional, even if they ask. So then what this means is you can use that against people. And the way you use it is to first set up an agreement. So what you would do if somebody is asking you to provide medical information to return to work, for example, the first thing you don't want to do is get defensive. Because what a lot of people do is they come out of fear of something, fear of loss or fear of a confrontation or something like that. And then they start getting really defensive, and that's not the way to handle things. However you handle anything, the more calm, balanced, and grounded you can be in your response or your action, the better the outcome's going to be. So the first thing you need to do is see it as an offer, and only an offer. It's not mandatory. It's not a requirement. It's not compulsory. It's not law. It's none of those things. It's an offer. So then when you hear you've got to get a medical procedure like jabs before you can come back to work, you hear it as, I'm offering that you can get medical procedures before you come back to work. And as soon as you phrase it as an offer, it's far more empowering because you don't have anything to defend now. There's nothing to be fearful of. It's an offer. Like you offering to me, hey, Tom, do you want to come on the show? It's at 6 o'clock. You're not forcing me to do it. If I wanted, it's like the time itself, that could be negotiated. The length of time could be negotiated. The day could be negotiated. There's so many different ways, or I could just say, no, I don't want to do it. So there's a lot of different ways you can handle an offer. So then if somebody says, you've got to get a jab before you come back to work, that's essentially an offer. So you can say, well, how do I want to handle this? So now instead of being reactive and then coming at it from a place of disempowerment, now you can just act based on how you want to handle it. So you could say, yeah, hey, look, interesting offer. This isn't what you would say like word for word. This is the nuts and bolts of it. You'd say, it's an interesting offer. Thanks very much for that. I'll consider it. Hey, look, I'd actually be happy to do that just so long as you can show me that you're a qualified medical practitioner. I'm pretty sure that's my private personal medical information you're asking for, isn't it? I mean, if you're asking about a vaccination, that's a medical procedure. Therefore, it's my medical information. So I'm just wondering, before I say I will or I won't get that done, I'm wondering why you're asking me about my medical information. So first, if they're not a medical professional, they're way out of line. So they are actually then breaking a law by doing that. So they're going against privacy. And there's a term, which there's several terms, there's personating and impersonating, but either way, they are acting in a capacity that they are not, and this is important, not covered by liability to act in. They don't have that place to be able to speak about that because they might be a butcher or a IT company or a media outlet. They're not a medical professional. They cannot start talking about that because there's liability involved in doing so, especially if they use a word like you're required. If your employer says you're required to get this done before you come back to work, guess who the liability falls on then? It's them. It's the employer. They're way out of line. And as soon as you can bring something like that up, they generally will backpedal quite a lot. So if this is me, I'll just kind of like semi-role play as if it's a boss asking me for a medical status. So they've sent me an email or they've sent me a text or they've called me into their office and they've said, look, before you come back on the, say, 1st of December, you've got to have 2 vaccinations before you come back to work. And I'll say, okay, right. So are you telling me that I'm fired if I don't get a medical procedure? Is that what you're saying? So what I'm doing is I'm asking questions. I'm not going to go making claims. I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to refuse. I'm just going to ask questions just to form agreements here. So I say, hey, listen, you're telling me I'm fired if I don't get a medical procedure. Is that what you're saying? They'll usually beat about the bush and say, it's a government requirement. Everyone's got to do this and that. I go, okay, so you just told me everyone's got to do it. And you said it's a government requirement. So I've got 2 questions for you. One, am I everyone? Do you normally refer to me as everyone? Because as far as I'm aware, I'm not everyone. So I don't know who this everyone is that you're referring to, but as far as I'm aware, it's not me. Second of all, you just said that's a government requirement. So I didn't realize I was working for the government. I thought I was working for Ted's Butcher or Bob's Gym. So where are you getting off pretending you're the government? Is that not a federal crime to pretend that you're a government official? I'm being a bit smart-assy here, but something to that effect.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Yeah,
Then what it's doing is I'm not, again, just if you look at what's going on, I'm not refusing anything. I'm not even talking about the jab. I'm just questioning them. And what I'm really doing is I'm getting at the fact that they have no place or authority to ask me to do that in the first place, let alone do anything about it if I don't want to have that procedure done. The fact that they're even asking. So then I'll say this, I'll say, hey, look, it seems like you're kind of crossing a lot of boundaries here. Now, I don't want our relationship to fall out because I really enjoy working for you. Otherwise, of course, I wouldn't be here. I value my job and I value you as a boss, or I value the company that employs me. So I'd hate for anything, bad to happen to you. It seems like you're crossing a line here. Now, if I were to report this to, say, an ombudsman or a governing body, how would that look for you? How's your liability insurance? Is that up to date? Because if it turns out that you're trying to either discriminate against me, violate my privacy, or violate any of my civil rights, I'm not sure that that'd go well for you. Now, I'm not going to do that. So what I generally do is I put pressure on people so they can feel it. Then right at the point that someone might want to become defensive, because that's human nature, I'll take the pressure off. So I'll say something like, well, I'm not going to do that. So now they know that I'm not threatening them, because threats are not a good thing to make. So
yeah, you don't want to be the aggressor.
Yeah. But look, I'd hate for that to have to occur. So we can pretend this meeting never happened if you like, and I'll see you back at work on Monday or on the 1st or whatever they said. You know what I mean? Kind of choose the outcome already. That's because at no stage would I ever think that it's a possibility that I'm not coming back to work, and I would act and speak as such. I would not be trying to claw something back that I think I'm losing. I would only be speaking insofar as I've chosen the end result. I know who I am, and that's the end of the story. If you want to go and do something unlawful, well, then here comes a claim against you to your indemnity insurer for unfair dismissal and discrimination and violating privacy and all the other kind of jazz that they could be held accountable for. Breach of contract, for one, if you're employed full-time. There'll be nothing about medical procedures in your contract. I mean, for 99% of positions out there.
Yeah.
So what it's doing, Anthony, is it's bringing up for the employer, for whoever's giving you the offer, it's showing him what they're really doing without you having to lay it out. It's like them seeing it for himself. And then you've got the power then to negotiate. So then you can say, listen, if it's immunization that you're concerned about, let me assure you, my medical records are personal and private, and I'll be keeping them as such. Thanks very much. But let me assure you, I'm fully immunized, and that's that. Now, immunized can mean anything. You don't even have to explain what that means. Now, immunized is I eat fruit in the morning, so I'm immunized, It doesn't, there's no definition that has to fall into. So what we're getting at here is A, seeing it as an offer. B, not having to argue, defend, or anything like that, because it is just an offer. And C, we're just asking questions. Now, what happens if someone doesn't want to answer them? What happens if we go back to the start of that and I say, yeah, look, you tell me I'm fired, or if I don't get this done by the 1st of December, and they go, mate, look, we're not having this discussion here, all right? It's a government requirement. My hands are tied. That's the end of the story. And then I go, so are you telling me this, or are you? And they go, no, I don't. Look, we're not having this discussion. What happens then? Well, there's this thing called a tacit agreement. Silence is acquiescence. And if you've asked somebody a question 3 times and they refuse or neglect to answer the question, you can answer it for them. So you can still go through the same process. And this is very similar to when I was doing it and I showed others how to do the non-consent process in court, is that when you know that if you just stay in your position and you hold that position, then you can get a result. As soon as you bail on it and you establish a position but you don't hold it, well, then you just kind of lose by default. So what you're doing is setting up the other based on the rules of commerce and forming an agreement. You're setting them up to be dishonorable and for them to be in default. And that way you can use it against them. Now, it's not just so easy as just doing that, but you can do that.
Yeah, no, fantastic information. There's a lot there, so I hope you're all picking up some of that and share this around for someone else that might be able to use that. There was a specific question that came through from a viewer. I'll just put it on the screen. Can you see that? Someone who needs to attend family court, but it can only do so if they're double jabbed. So how can that be negotiated?
It depends on who's trying to stop them. So let's say it's a courtroom that's trying to stop them. Okay, let me just back up a sec. I'm going to answer this question directly, but I just want to tell you before I answer it that the reason that I've been successful in the vast majority of things that I've done myself is that I've been creative. And what that means is that I've known the outcome, I've known what I'm right in being able to do, and then I've been creative about how I've got there. It's not always a matter of going head to head with the problem, because sometimes it's not the best way. You've got to pick your battles. So if this is the thing, and my battle is not with getting in there, I need to get into family court because my battle is with my adversary, my ex-partner or whatever it is, I'm just going to get in there any way I need to. And if that means I get one of those fake tick things on my phone, then that's what I'm going to do. You know, I'm going to pick my battles. I'm going to find a creative way to get in there. But to answer the question directly, the way that they're asking for confirmation is generally by just that, a phone. Is it a law that everybody needs to carry or even own a smartphone? Of course it's not. So if you walk up and they say, we need evidence that you double jab to come in here, you say, that's great. What kind of evidence do you need? And they say, we need to see your tick. Well, I don't know. Is it on me? Am I supposed to have a tick on me? What are you talking about? Getting at the fact that I don't have a phone, you know? So no, show me your phone, show me your app. It's like, well, okay, sorry, I didn't know what you're talking about. Look, I actually don't carry a mobile phone. Just leave it at that. And they'll go, well, we can't help you, or you've got to show some evidence. So, well, it would appear to me that if you don't let me in, that you're discriminating against people who don't carry technological devices. Is that what you're doing? Notice what I do is I set them up with a question. It's like a closing question in sales. Is that what you're doing? Sounds like that's what you're doing, isn't it? Like you're really setting them up to agree that they're doing something wrong. Now, they might say, no one can come in without that. And then you'll say, well, listen, I am actually, this is up to you how you would handle it. But you can say, look, I am actually vaccinated if that's what you're asking. Now, I'm not sure what source of authority you have to delve into my medical information, but if you're going to discriminate against me for not having a phone on me or even owning one, and then B, you're going to delve into my medical information without authority or qualifications to do so, I'm actually going to have to hold you liable for that. So now I'm going to need your name. What's your name? And then see what happens when you put them on the spot by asking for them. They might go, oh, I've got to talk to a supervisor, or I'll have to get the manager down here, or the clerk of the court or whatever. A lot of times you'll get in for doing that. The difference here, because it's a court, is that they're not government. Courts are Masonic temples. They're private businesses. But for the purpose of their facade, they claim to come under like New South Wales government or Victorian government or what have you. So therefore, the government directives do apply to that venue because it's a government venue. Now, it's not, okay, that's a separate issue. You could hold position on if you wanted, but they are going to pull that, look, it's a government mandate. This is the thing. No one gets in without showing a vaccination status. So what I'm saying is there are ways to get in by holding position. You just have to be very precise and diligent in the way that you bring that across. And really, it's an energetic thing. You've got to really stand strong in yourself, be very centered and grounded, and just be not perturbed by what they're saying. Your energy from here is already moving into that place. You're already moving past them. You're already in there. You're already in the courtroom. That's how you've got to, and then your words will come out in that way. If you stand there and you're not yet in there, and you're like, oh, I'm just going to argue here, but I'm going to say this, and now I'm going to bring this act up, and now I'm going to do that. But your energy is staying where you are. When you're at a court, you're probably going to stay there. So the first thing is you need to move yourself in there energetically, and your words will carry that, and it'll have a different effect. So then, other than that, it's about being creative. You know, I would probably, in all honesty, in this situation, if my kids were at stake or something like that, I'd just get myself a fake thing on my phone. And I go, yep, here you go. They're never going to go, is that a real app? Or let me go, look. And then you would hold the position on the privacy thing. Look, mate, this is my private personal property. It's mine. You're not looking at it. Something to that effect.
Yeah, sure. I just want to be clear before we move on that nothing in this show is to be considered legal advice or anything of that nature, health advice, all the rest. I certainly, and I'm sure Tom does as well, encourage you to do your own research, educate yourself properly, and make your own decisions for your personal situation. Regarding using so-called fake ticks and the rest, I certainly don't promote any of that. But, just for someone who might ask, is using one of those fake type ticks, could it be considered fraud in some cases?
Well, hey, that's a really good question. First of all, I don't use them either. I'm not into that sort of stuff. But at the same time, there's two ways you can look at this, and the answer is it depends, and it depends on one factor: do you incriminate yourself or not? Because that being fraud is an offer. It's only fraud if you admit to it or you put yourself into it in some way. Then it becomes fraud. Until you incriminate yourself, it's not. It's hearsay, it's conjecture, it's alleged. It's like, it's not, even for example, being pulled up, doing 80 kilometers an hour in a 60 zone. Until you incriminate yourself, you are not doing anything. You weren't even doing any speed. They put the offer, you were doing this and that, what's your excuse? Or do you know how fast you were going? They put it out there as an offer. And until you incriminate yourself, they have no evidence. You're the second witness. You're the one that incriminates yourself. So let's just break this down because it's interesting because it relates to a lot of different examples you could come up with. So let's say you've got a mobile phone and on it is a tick, and it turns out that it was fabricated from some app that you're not supposed to have. Now, that being your phone is an assumption. You using that app is an assumption. You willingly doing anything illegal or fraudulent is an assumption until you make it real. So a quick example of that is a driver license or a passport or any kind of photo ID. And somebody says, that's you, isn't it? Until you agree to it, that's not you. How could it be? Because a photograph is a photograph of you. Is that you? Of course it's not. It's a representation of you. It's a photograph. I'm me. A photograph of me is a photograph. And this is the thing about law and rights and everything about legalities is it's all about being very specific and precise. And the mistake people make is in kind of joining two imaginary dots. It's a process called joinder where people join to being a name, for example. But if somebody says, that's you, isn't it? I say, what, this? Isn't this a piece of plastic? He's saying that's me. Aren't I me? How is that me? It looks a bit small, isn't it? Like how could that be me? So until you admit that that's you, it's not you. Until you agree and join to being that, that's not you. So neither is an app yours. Neither did you write anything. Here's another example, right? Let's say somebody's videotaped you at a protest and you're not supposed to be there because it's lockdown or something. And they go, we've got video footage of you. You've done something wrong. That's a $5,000 fine. You say, I'm sorry. What are you asserting here? Are you trying to tell me that I've done something wrong? They'll say, yeah, you broke lockdown. You're at the protest. We've got the video footage here. And I'll say, what's that? And they'll go, that's you. That's you at the thing. And I'll say, how is that me? Until I say, yeah, that was me, or I try to fight it, it's not me. They have no evidence. They go, stop playing silly. We've got the evidence right here. And I'll say, I see you showing me an LCD screen, but I still don't know what you're talking about. And by the way, this is my personal residence. You're trespassing. You got to leave. See you later. At no point would I agree to having been there or that being me, because they'll go, this is evidence that you were there. And I'll say, well, look, that may or may not be true, but I don't believe that I was anywhere. So I'm going to need you to leave now. This conversation's over. So while I do not incriminate myself, they don't have the evidence because the evidence is actually me. They're waiting for me to be the evidence. They're giving me offers. This is you. You were there. We've got this. That's all offers. It's not evidence. It's an offer. It's like a trick to get you to be the evidence. And so, yeah, to answer the question then about is that fraudulent to use that? Well, it's arguable, put it that way.
Yeah, fantastic. I think, yeah, a lot of information there to unpack, I guess, for people. But yeah, there's lots there if you look into it. Good segue into protests, actually. So, recently on the weekend, we were at the Foster Curry rally that was there, and there was a large protest here in Melbourne, Brisbane, and the rest. What's your take on some of what you're seeing happening around the country at the moment? What's your take on some of that stuff?
Sure, I love it. I think it's great. Look, to be honest, I'm not a protester. I don't particularly agree with the general. It depends on the situation, put it this way, and I'll tell you why. I feel that when people are going out asking for something or demanding it, it's a disempowered place to be. Because if you're going, what do we want? Freedom. When do we want it? Now. And you keep chanting, it's like, who are you doing that to? Like, who are you asking for freedom for? It's a disempowered place. It's like, you give me the right to do something. It's like, no, you have the right. You are free. So you don't go asking other people for it. And also, who you are asking, the sky? Like, who are you chanting at? So moving from that to the actual protest, though, I think they're amazing. And the reason I think they're amazing is because I don't see a lot of disempowerment. I see a lot of people just practicing civil disobedience, which is very empowering. So that's the difference. And the other part of it, of course, is let's say they're trying to take down a beautiful part of old growth forest, and there's bulldozers there, and there's just for greedy that. I wouldn't sit at home and just go, yeah, I don't agree with protesting, and just let them bulldoze a forest. I would definitely be out there. I'd chain myself to a tree and I'd go, you're not get near that tree, because that's empowered. That's not disempowered. So what I'm saying is, what is the difference? Like, where is it coming from? Is it a disempowered act because you don't know what to do and you're just yelling at someone to change something for you? That I don't agree with. But the empowered form of either protest, getting in the way of something and disrupting, or civil disobedience, I think is great. And what I saw with the hundreds of thousands of people come out over the weekend was awesome. I really love that for two reasons. One, I think it just allows others to get involved. Because does that really change much? I'm not really sure. I mean, we've had protests at the border here between New South Wales and Queensland. They haven't opened the border. So I don't think protesting in that way really gets stuff done in that way. But what it does is it shows people what's going on. And then a lot of those others that are thinking, I don't know if this is right. There's something fishy about it, but I don't really know enough. And then they see hundreds of thousands of people. They go, right, I'm in. And so it allows those, by standing in your truth, if you're somebody that's strong enough or willing enough to do that, it allows those that are not yet there to start to feel that they can too. And it gives them hope. So that's why I'm really supportive of these rallies and protests that are currently going around the country, and also, in other countries as well.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, a concept that I was introduced to by Mark as well was that idea of pros and cons, diametrically opposed ideas. So protest versus contest. At the end of a protest, there's not really an outcome. At the end of a contest, there is a decided winner, I guess. Just something to wrap people's head around, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So an interesting aspect too to the protest, watching some footage, Aussie Cossack and the rest that I really like, and Real Rukshan and Rebel News, all great shows that I follow, and they highlighted the other side, which was the Antifa protest happening at the same time, and apparently they're anti-fascism and all of that kind of stuff, but they seemed more fascist than the other side. What it was a moment for me where I'm going, what's happening here? Is everything upside down all of a sudden?
Yeah, well, I mean, we do live in a world. We do definitely live in a world of inversion. I mean, honestly, through studying, my career as a holistic health practitioner, and from questioning the structure of things from when I was young, everything's inverted. It's like if you're told one thing, the inverse is probably true. So what we see, look, I haven't actually seen it. I've just heard of it, but I know the story. It's like the same thing repeated many times over, is that as soon as there's a movement and it's gathering momentum and it's going to buck the system itself will plant something in there to try to divert the attention or the energy or the movement, and to try to disrupt that. And that's why a lot of these times people will put in what's called controlled opposition, which is placing something in there to try to put a wedge between another divide and conquer tactic between the united forces or energies that are coming together. It's a defensive move, and someone just Fiona's put in it's infiltrated. So this is like an infiltration of the movement. And look, it's just the way things are. But I don't necessarily disagree with it, because at the end of the day, it's a test. If somebody's not that sure and there's an infiltration, if they're easily diverted, they weren't that strong in themselves yet. So it's a reflection of where we're at. It allows us to go, oh, okay, well, I'm not so sure yet. So then that just allows people to have their own personal journey towards coming into their own self and realizing who they are. But the Antifa thing, I think, when they calling people right wing, you're racist if you're I think you're racist if you're these.
Yeah. White supremacist, racist.
Yeah,
I think a lot of these people either don't own dictionaries because, but you don't even. I was going to raise some money and buy them some, but I think if you just Google the word fascist, it would be apparently clear that what they were doing was exactly what they were fighting against. But who knows? So anyway, we'll move away from that because we could probably go forever about that particular topic. But what do you think about? So, have you heard about the situation with some of the original people out at Northern Territory and other remote areas?
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on some of what you've seen so far? Some of it's a bit concerning.
Yeah, I don't know, because I'm just getting so many conflicting reports. So I've seen some stuff come from elders to some Indigenous here, which I'm not allowed to speak about. But the basics are, I've seen military helping people, not keeping food from them. I've heard reports that they're actually being looked after. They're not being forced to do anything. Yes, there's some coercion going on, but no one's being forced to do anything. But then there might be other camps that are different. So I'm hearing mixed reports. And until I've got confirmation on anything, I can't really, if you're in any position of providing information or a source of media like yourself, got to be really diligent with checking sources before you go saying people are being forced jabbed, or they're being starved out, or they're being something, without actually being there and seeing it for yourself or confirming it through a reliable source. And at the moment, I'm unable to confirm either way. So at the moment, I'm ready and willing to actually make a trip there and start documenting things myself to see if there's anything that can be done. But maybe they don't need help. And sometimes turning up when you're uninvited to help is a bit of an affront to, especially when you're dealing with mob politics and stuff. So I'm going to need to wait for an invitation for that to happen and for it to be necessary. So until then, I'm just saying I don't know, because I don't.
Yeah, I think it's really good what you're talking about. When you're in a position of authority with regards to the dissemination of information, you should check sources and make sure you know it's true. Only if the mainstream media would do that, I think we'd be in a very different situation. But look, we haven't had a lot of questions come through, and we could probably keep going. But maybe at that point, we'll start to close off the interview. Thanks a lot for spending the time with us. You mentioned that there's another panel interview that you're doing later today. When you send that through, I'll put that in the chat.
Yeah, it's at 8 p.m. Daylight time, and that's I'm not sure if we're streaming on Facebook or YouTube, because Facebook blocked it last time. But I've got a panel discussion with the Northern Rivers for Safe Technology crew, and we're going to be talking about 5G and what's going on with it, and all questions related to safe technology. So that's 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time tonight. But that'll be put up on my channels anyway. So if people can't tune in live, the replay will be posted.
Yeah, fantastic. And you just have any final comments for some of the people listening that they might watch it after it's been recorded?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely. When a lot of people want help, they'll listen to something like this and they'll go, "Oh, you could help me with my taxes, or I've got this parking fine or a speeding fine, or I need to pay something." Now, when I went and I learned from Mark, I never asked him for help. And I think that's the reason that I'm able to do what I can do now. It's because I was willing to handle anything that I got myself into by myself. I wasn't looking for somebody else to do it for me. And while I'm not adverse to helping people, I highly, highly recommend to people that even if you've got a speeding fine, it would probably be in your best interest to pay it until you figure out how to do things yourself. Because we all wish we were taught this when we were young. you know? Like the amount of stuff I could have done better in my life or not got arrested and spent a night in a lockup trying to do this, I think you've got to take some of the knocks in order to succeed, right? So I just want to put that out there, to not fear now that you've just been made aware that there's a some corruption and it's an unfair thing, and if you knew better, you didn't have to do any of it. But we're all like that. So I'd say that be patient with it. Be patient with learning, internalize and embody it first before you go. I always say it's like a martial art. You're not going to go and become aware of a concept of kickboxing and then be able to kickbox. You're also not going to do a few months of lessons of kickboxing or jiu-jitsu and then go choking out criminals. You'll get hurt trying. So become aware of it, then learn it, but then embody it. And the process will take as long as it will take. But the process is not about discharging fines or telling cops to go away or getting through the courtroom without your vaccination status. It's about empowerment. And the more you do that, the more you will empower yourself. And that's when things will change in the outside world. But first and foremost, it's an internal state change that should be the goal, or at least I just want to make it aware that that is what you're actually moving towards, rather than just being able to, have your way with any offer that comes your way.
Fantastic advice there for sure. About, it applies more than just in this area too. And I think, what I see a lot is, the reason a lot of these crimes, I guess, are able to, or so-called crimes are able to be committed is because that blind subjugation to authority. And a way to change that is to accept full responsibility and, be that change that you want to be seeing and step into that truth, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And we are technically allowing it, and even if we're not, we might be saying no now, but a lot of our actions and the convenience we've wanted for the past few decades has led to this. So we've all played a part in it. And it's because not enough people just said, no, like, I don't recognize that as an authority. I'm not doing that. I'm doing it this way. And until enough people do that, it's not as strong. So it is a matter of taking some responsibility for sure. Yeah.
Fantastic. And on that, we'll close it up. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. It was great to meet you, and I look forward to staying in touch. I'm sure we'll be talking soon about lots of other things. Thanks for all the people that joined us live today. Thank you for everyone else that watched this after the fact, and my team of volunteers that help me out each week to bring these shows to you. And we might close with some scenes from our time in Foster Tuncurry. And you'll find Tom Barnett on the At What Cost documentary being created by Contrast Media, and there'll be a link at the end. Please, every dollar helps to get this documentary over the line, completed and done for everyone. So on that, thanks again, Tom. Thanks everyone else. We'll close out with this video.
I want the children to learn for the future, learn how to think, not what to think. We don't want to be telling you what to think. You need to learn how to think. That's the only way forward.
The government are doing the best they can with what they got, but they keep changing it. They keep moving the goalposts, and we want it to stop.
What's going on here? There's more to this story. Why are they pushing this vaccine to this extreme?
You have the right to choose what you do with your body, no matter what anyone says.